welcome everybody. This is the first in our series of sessions called We Need to Talk, and we're talking about equity and race in schools. And our first session's topic is learning in a triple pandemic. So I'm joined by some guests, which I'll introduce in a moment here, and we're going to talk through some of the challenges and concerns about virtual learning in our current state of things, and what we're calling a triple pandemic. So by that, we're referring to, of course, the health pandemic, coronavirus, COVID-19, that's affecting everyone, and economic pandemic as a result of that, and also as a result of the conditions that existed before for a racial pandemic is what we're talking about when we refer to the triple pandemic. So I'm Eli. I am the communications director at Justified Anger, and often at Justified Anger since COVID-19 happened, we have been talking about how things were pre-health pandemic and what's going on now and how they're going to still exist after. So we often talk about the disparities that existed before the health pandemic that we're seeing for people of color and the African American community, and how those, if they're not addressed in a real way, are going to continue on, and I'm sure will continue. But what we're hoping to do here is start a conversation about how we can address those disparities, especially in our school system and our education system. So, and really trying to talk about it more as a community. I'm going to jump in and talk to Jackie Hunt in just a moment, but I just wanted to say that this series is brought to you by some concerned parents in the community, and especially the Lowell elementary community. And we understand that there's going to be some just questions and things about, some of us white parents bringing up these topics and facilitating them. But we think it's important enough to start that conversation. But our goal is to ultimately give voice to parents and educators in the community of color and the African American community so that they can be heard more. So we're trying to put a spotlight on that more. And I think Jackie Hunt's going to have a great example of that if she wants to talk about it towards the end. But I want to bring Jackie on to talk a little bit about what she's been seeing in the community and what she's been hearing from people. She is the CEO and founder of Foster of Dane County. She has been doing vital work for decades in the Madison area to address the disparities of people of color and offer relief and hope to families at critical times in their lives. So I know since this pandemic and in the spring and summer, you've been delivering meals to families, working with families and things that they might be going through challenges. And in fact, you have to leave a little bit early today because you are in your car ready to deliver meals right now for lunch. So you're on the job. So welcome, Jackie. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So
yes.
We're going to jump into things. And I just kind of want to ask you, what is your experiences with the challenges facing families during this pandemic? And, and also how are those challenges and the concerns that they have affecting, going back into virtual learning, in September?
Well, first of all, the challenges that I've been experiencing with families through the pandemic are food insecurities, housing insecurities, financial insecurities. And in addition to all of that, as if that weren't enough, the out and out blatant and racist acts of some groups in our country and violence towards Black people. People and, parents that I encounter are overstimulated mentally with images of what's going on across our country. Of course, messages that are being heard from, I just say 45. And then the realities of day-to-day life, food and housing and transportation and, child care and all other things that are constantly creating havoc and creating stressors in the lives of particularly marginalized families of color. We have a lot of transient families right now. Housing insecurity is huge. I have never seen anything like this. And I know that none of us have because we're in a pandemic. But the reality is that some of these systems that are being increasingly impacted are really just showing themselves true. That's what it is. It was always there, but it's even more evident and more prevalent and more present in our day-to-day activity than it had been before pre-COVID. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And so what kind of challenges or like specific lived realities are you seeing with some of the families that you meet with, the kids, the parents, and especially things that maybe like the district might, school districts might be missing, that they, what are the gaps that they might not even realize are going on with the family?
I'll give you a few. So there may be a household where there is a parent who is working. That means the 10 or the 12-year-old becomes a latchkey kid because the daycare center is closed, and because of lack of transportation or financial resources, you have to leave your kids at home unattended. You tell the next door neighbor, to watch out if anything happens, that kind of stuff. And you got another kind of family that may have health conditions, pre-existing conditions that prevent them from going to work. And unemployment is a nightmare to try to get started. And so they're living on nothing. Of course, well, I shouldn't say nothing. For some reason, it's easy to access food stamps, or easier to access food stamps. And I won't speak about what that means or how that becomes a resource to some, right? But then utilities, internet, phone, cable, those type of things. Like how do you keep 4 kids, 4 different developmental stages, entertained or on a day-to-day basis from sun up to sundown. That's some real things. And then another example could be the parent or the grandparent who has mobility challenges or struggles with their own mental health. And then you have a 15 or 16-year-old trying to maintain everything in the household and probably trying to work a little part-time job to bring, much that I encounter. Like I go on and on and on and on, and there's no easy, because each household has its own within the context of the global, concerns and issues. They also have their own unique challenges within each household. I don't expect the district to be able to answer all these questions and respond to every concern, but I do want to make sure that they have considered it, right? That it's considered, and that at the end of the day, students will be able to have a little grace. Parents will be having a little grace, and that they will come up with some ways to support those truly marginalized families. And I don't want to be judgmental because they're all marginalized in some way. And as is, all households are going to be challenged by this new school system and how things are going to be ran. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's good. And I know from some of our other conversations, I'm thinking of, we may talk more about this later, but a lot of families are talking about sort of how they can maybe group up or partner with other families to kind of make sure that they're getting that sort of social needs and
So,
community
so
needs. And what do you
mhm.
see in the African American community? Like, I think there's already a strong sense of community, but how do we make sure these kids are feeling valued and the parents are feeling heard?
So I'm in contact with several educators, um, and one in particular, Andrea Davis. Um, this woman is remarkable. She's put together these kits, right, that accentuate Black excellence, right? Books, like worksheets, like activities that they can do, science projects, all these things in a kit that comes in a brightly colored bag. And it's got a cartoon image of Black kids on the playground playing, I think it is. And she's distributing them. They're doing a program on Wednesdays, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday over at Penn Park for third and fourth graders. A partnership with Richard Jones. I'm not sure if Mount Zion Church is behind it, but I know that several of its members are a part of this. And Dr. Gloria Latz and Billings, I think she is the one who kind of like worked with Andrea to create the curriculum. But that's one thing. And I just want to say this too, and I think it's important to hear this. When you say the African American community, there are multiple African American communities in Madison. So you can't just say the African American community, because there are plenty of African American families who are thriving and whose children are going to get the homeschooling support that they need. They are able to maintain their households. They aren't experiencing all the hardships that the marginalized communities of color are experiencing. So I don't want to clump everything together. And the other part of that is that there are other groups who are marginalized as well, not just Black children. There are Latino, Asian, Hmong, and even some predominantly white households that are going to have, that this is going to have a huge impact on as well. I guess, I'm thinking about the transient families that come through to get food when I'm passing out food or when I'm taking lunches to drop off. If you're sleeping in your car under the Walmart parking lot, like, how are you going to access electricity to charge your child's Chromebook? You only get so much hotspot on your phone. And if you have 3 kids, trying to access that, and you're trying to work yourself on your phone from home, which is your vehicle, this is a very real scenario. I'm not making this up, and we got doubled up and tripled up households, kids from every developmental stage. I had a mom share with me that she has a daughter that needs to be in daycare. She has to work, and then that leaves her 9-year-old home or wherever. I'm thinking about how I haven't really come up with a tried and true method to do it, but I am encouraging pods. That's what we're calling them, like little learning pods. And I don't want to get ahead of myself and talking about it because I don't have it all figured out yet. But I'm one of those people. First of all, I don't have kids going back to school in MMSD this year for the first time in about 30 years. I don't have a child in my household that's going back to school. But I work with many households for whom this is going to have an adverse impact on. The pods that I'm thinking, and I have not yet really had conceptualized how they would look, would be something that the district could consider. And I know that it would take a lot of work for those extremely, needy households for the situation that I just described. The mom that has a toddler that needs to go to daycare and there's going to be a 9-year-old. That's a kid that needs to be in a pod, and I'm not saying like we can come up with, like, there's so many scenarios and so many needs and reasons why a child would need a pod, right? But the other part of it is parents. I'm going to encourage parents. We're having a summit on September 3rd. Black Education Matters. So I'm still pulling things together and coming up with the format. We got some good speakers coming up, but we want to have an opportunity for parents to be able to express this to the people who need to hear it, to the district. And then we want to get some other educators to come up and try to brainstorm some solutions and some alternatives for parents who are really going to be struggling. We have a huge educational gap between Black and brown kids and white kids. In my head, this is only going to widen that gap for those marginalized students. Again, I say there are going to be plenty of African American, plenty of Black students who are going to have the resources, and their parents are going to be able to make sure that their kids get what they need. They're going to do what they do, and they're going to be fine. I ain't gonna say I'm not concerned about them, because even in those environments, those children will be suffering. They won't have socialization with their peers, like sitting in front of a screen, like I'm sure parents are going to become creative at how they do this, but that's where I'm talking about that grace needs to come in, like ain't no 8:30 to 2:30 school day gonna work virtually online for anybody. I don't care who you are. like that's just not a reality for anyone, at least not from my perspective. But we just have to see what happens. So encouraging parents to think about how we can, like when I grew up, that was the norm. When my mama went to work or when my mama went to the store, and every parent pretty much had the same set of rules. If ain't no adult home, you don't go outside. You keep my door locked and you don't answer it and you don't talk to nobody and you wait till I come back home. So if somebody saw me outside and they had already saw my mom's car go, leave, my mom was going to find out that I had been outside. We watched out for each other like that. And I even have that with my kids coming up, my trailblazers. That was a community that I lived in. But with this new community that we live in, with all this info and technology and information that people have, and they're, it's so much that they don't get a chance to really like process it and identify it, or compartmentalize it, and then come up with a solid plan, as if to say like, okay, so here are the conditions and here are the responses. It doesn't happen like that. People just are like, I don't know what kind of world these youngins are creating now, but I worry about them a whole lot. And I call them youngins because there's a generation, I think, or two that is kind of missing. And our world is showing you that, even here in Madison and in Dane County, we've been having an increased number of, homicides, gun violence and things of that nature. So, I don't want to get off on a tangent, but I just wanted to connect those dots, right? Because they all are interconnected, right? And if you're hopeless and you don't have a home security or housing security, you don't have food security, you don't have financial security, you have to survive the way you know how. And even then, when your best efforts to do what's right don't or fail, you become hopeless. When you become hopeless, you become desperate. And desperate people do desperate things. I don't want education. I don't want this to become, at least in my heart, I hope that education doesn't become yet another one of those, insecurities that render especially Black and brown children hopeless. Does that make sense?
Totally. Yeah. Thanks for being honest with us and sharing that. I think, and also thank you for pointing out that when we say African American community, it is a very diverse community, and
Yes.
we can't just blanket everybody in that community the same way. And I think that's why it's so important for what you're saying about, neighborhoods and communities coming together to watch out for one another,
Yes.
watch out for each
Yes.
other's kids, especially in this time, because the district can't do everything. So
Exactly.
we're gonna have to kind of get creative, right? And really show
Yeah.
them
Yeah.
we
I
care
just
about
wish the district would consider how they allocate resources, right? Because that's a bigger part of this, the allocation of resources. And not, like how those resources get out. They really need to think about it and maybe have, like I'm hoping from the Black Education Matters Summit that they'll hear some of that from parents and students and be able to take some of the suggestions from that summit into consideration and create or reallocate some of the funding that they have. And maybe the county and the state need to figure out how to pour more resources in to combat the achievement gap becoming wider.
Yeah, that's good. And I know you have to go, but do you have a date set yet for I think you were calling it the Black Education Matters virtual forum? It may change, but
Yes,
do you have a
yep,
date for
that's it.
that?
It was a rally. We were going to try to do it physically, but yeah, I don't want to put anyone at risk. I want to make sure that I take really good precautions to make sure that I'm safe when I'm delivering these lunches. And I don't want to be responsible for putting anyone at risk. And normally it's the back to school bash. It would be 12 years and we've grown exponentially over the course of 12 years. And so I just don't want that on my shoulders. I don't want that in my head or on my heart. So it will be virtual. It is scheduled right now for September 3rd at 7 p.m. It'll be just like this. It'll be a Zoom with panelists in it. And then it'll be a live stream as well as recorded for people to go back and view later. So I'm excited about it. It'll be the first one. I've never tried doing anything like this before. I'm one of those solution focused persons. And it was coming at me so much as I'm delivering food, that just kept coming up. School. So here's my effort in my little corner of the world to have a response.
Great. Yeah, and we'll be sure to send out more information, through the people listening to these sessions and watching them, to let them know about that when everything is set. But thank you so much for sharing, your experiences, what you're hearing, and again, sharing so honestly. I think it definitely needs to be heard. So appreciate it.
All right.
All right.
Well, thank you guys for having me.
Yeah, we'll let you do your thing.
All right. Cool.
All right.
Peace.
Take care, Jackie.
Yep. You too. Bye-bye.
All right. So we are going to continue on, and I'm going to introduce some other folks that are going to talk a little bit. Pam Brandt is an educator and has moved into the role of instructional coach at Lowell Elementary for this next year that we're going into. And she's going to be helping facilitate and ask questions for this next section. And we're also going to be speaking with Jami Wood and Amy Hilgendorf. They are members of the Equity and Action Committee of the Lapham-Marquette Parent-Teacher Group. And they were part of creating the Equity in Pandemic Schooling and Action Guide for families, educators, and communities. So I just want to mention, as we were putting this series together and thinking through topics and guests and things, this topic started to really become, really vital and important to going back into the school year. And so we thought we had to talk about this. And then suddenly we saw this action guide pop up. And so we said we should have them, some of the members share about that. So there is 10 action steps, 10 actions that people can take in the guide, and it's very clearly laid out. So we've shared that on the event page on Facebook, but if anybody needs more of that information or where to find it, feel free to message us on Facebook through the Lowell community page, and we'll also be sending out emails if people need that. But let's dig into things. I'm going to kind of turn things over to Pam as we kind of work through, what went into creating this this guide and some of the questions and actions that you're bringing up. Thanks for joining us.
Right. Thanks, Eli. I think that's a great place to start. And for Jami and Amy, can you tell us a little bit about how this guide came about?
Sure, I can start with that. Again, I'm Amy. I have a soon-to-be second grader, kid going into 4K as well at Lapham. I'm also attended Madison schools, so I bring a couple different perspectives to this, as well as anti-racist perspective as a person committed to anti-racist work, both through my kids' school as well as through Families for Justice, an organization I've been a part of for a while. So, in some ways, how this guide started kind of feels like a whirlwind. We really picked up this conversation about 3 weeks ago. But with all things pandemic, this is really not something new. It's just with things changing, there's a new sense of urgency around it. So yeah, going back into mid-July, we were starting to hear from some of the families that are part of our school, other neighbors, others in our networks, with the decision to go online for Madison schools. Some people were saying, you know what, I think I'm going to pull my kids. I'm going to homeschool. I'm going to go to private school. I'm going to hire a tutor and pod up in that way. And there was a lot of energy around that. There was also some national media attention around this too. So having this equity group, we decided let's talk about this. We were also, I think, like a lot of folks, noticing that the online transition in the spring had inequitable implications in terms of who was able to access that learning, what the burdens were for different families as they're trying to navigate their economic situation, their kids, all of that. And so there was a sense of, okay, this is likely going to have impacts in terms of equity as well. We also are very fortunate to have education professors at our school who are also women of color and have been tracking this professionally as well. Erica Turner in particular really was the lead in shaping up this guide, but also Maxine McKinney de Royston had a key role as well. And so our overall sense is that we really needed to have a conversation both at our school, but then also across the district as well, because, it's not just an individual school problem. There's issues across our district, across our community, as well as real opportunity as well.
Can you share a little bit about what these 10 action steps involve?
Yeah, these action steps, we kind of talked about how they are all advocacy at different levels, right? So there's kind of things you can do that impact education nationally, and there's things that impact education locally. So it's all about just kind of trying to be supportive of public education right now in this moment, and also, but not losing that lens equity, and making sure that stays forefront in people's minds and in these conversations. Did you want me to read it?
Maybe give us, just a phrase from one of the 10.
Okay. Yeah. So the first one is just contact Congress to demand school funding and family supports. The second is advocate for measures to stop the spread of COVID. The third is advocate for district remote learning options and resources so that all students can have access. The fourth is demand all students have opportunities for learning that will stimulate their minds and nurture their well-being. The fifth is press for a moratorium on the end of high-stakes testing and test-based accountability and grades. Number 6 is keep your child enrolled. Number 7 is work with families and educators to identify and share resources or identify needs. 8 is link your school efforts to district efforts. 9 is support groups already doing this advocacy that are primarily groups of color. Listeners there. And then the last one is spread the word to others and invite them to take action also.
Beautiful, thank you. I want to dig into some of those a little bit more. Can you say more about maybe what your group has been talking about in regards to how kids need their minds stimulated and nurturing their well-being at this time?
Yeah, so the guide, which again was kind of thought through very thoughtfully from people that study this and kind of leaning on research and what other groups are saying. And it really calls for learning that is creative and collective, culturally relevant, justice-minded, joyful, and caring. I think that, kids cannot have their minds stimulated and nurture their well-being if their basic needs aren't being met. So, the district needs to, the health and well-being of our children needs to be kind of the most important thing right now. And I think to do that well, the district has to be listening kind of to Jackie's point about like everyone kind of has different needs at this moment. So we can't lump everyone together. We kind of need to be looking at each individual family and kind of what are your needs and how do we come alongside that. Kids, the focus on social emotional right now is very important since we're just all feeling a lot of feelings, and if kids don't feel safe and if they don't feel like they matter, their minds are not going to be stimulated and their well-being is not going to be nurtured. And then we also need to have open and relevant curriculum and education that incorporates teaching and learning about current events. So actually talking about the moment we're in and of global pandemic and Black Lives Matters and, economic crisis and how they're impacting the lived experiences of our students. And so incorporating that into what kids are being asked to think about. And if they're being asked to think and work on things that they care about and that they're living, then their imaginations will probably be nurtured and their well-being will be nurtured in a much stronger way than pretending that all that is on pause and we're, going to go back to normal or something.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm aware that the school district is doing a lot of this work, looking at cells, thinking about how to incorporate those into other subject areas and learning. But I'm wondering specific for the Lapham-Marquette school, is there work that your committee is doing along with the school? Or how are you taking all of this great exploration and work that you've done and taking some action on it?
I can share some thoughts there. So certainly we've been talking about what are the issues, what can we do, what are some practical entry points for parents, but also others in the community who really care about our schools. First, a key point is that keep your kids enrolled. That money is really significant to the district, not just this year, but coming up as well, the next 3 years. But also, public education has been under attack for decades now, and it increasingly looks more challenging. So we might be at a really critical moment right now for public support for education. And so, that's kind of number one. But two, we're talking about, what are other ways that families can support each other with our schools in a more collective sense. When people get stressed, we live in a very individual society, and we tend to go with that stress to how do I protect my kid? And we really need to focus on our collective well-being right now. So ways that we can do that, one is definitely the advocacy efforts. Like Jackie was saying, we need to make sure that resources are allocated where they need to be. And education, typically underfunded, we see the importance of that funding even more so now. So there are some advocacy letters that Families for Justice has put together, sample templates that you can send to the city, to the district. MTI has one that they're circulating that goes to the governor to support some additional funding there. You can advocate at your individual school too for this is what we're thinking hearing our families need. Here's how we want to partner with you to make sure that all families here have what they need. There may be also opportunities for parents and community members to help ensure that people have the materials that they need to support learning from home, to support the learning that's going to happen in these community hubs, continuing to support emergency funds that a lot of parent-teacher groups have put together, including Lowell, as I understand it, Lapham as well. And also, there's been discussion too about what might be some important volunteer opportunities right now for parents and other community members. At our school, we're talking about how can parents sign up to reach out to every parent, every family before school year starts and say, what do you need? How can we help make sure that that online learning is going to go well for you to meet your needs, as well as what can you offer? How can we support each other in this? And we've also had conversation too about what might be some ongoing volunteer roles. Many parents are used to coming into the classroom and helping out with reading. Is there an online aspect of that? Or are there, extracurricular extended learning kinds of opportunities that we can do in club formats? Or what's your pod strategy? How do we share it with each other, these kinds of strategies and tools to make that a more accessible option for lots of families? So yeah, there's a lot of ideas out there that we've been talking about. In the guide too, we also talk about supporting organizations, community-based organizations that are really working well with marginalized communities, whether that's communities of color or otherwise, but who already has those trusting relationships and is already putting effort into what do you need, how do we provide that, how do we support each other. So we've been trying to make some efforts through our group to connect to organizations like Urban Triage, Freedom Inc. I've also heard Boys and Girls Club is doing a lot of efforts right now, local community centers, as well as, there's some informal efforts going on too through churches or just for the respected folks in neighborhoods and different circles. So we're making an effort to try and engage in meaningful relationships and support with those organizations that already have those trusting relationships. And I think every school can do that, looking both at a school, neighborhood level, but then also citywide too.
Thank you. So with all of those resources out there and kind of getting this conversation going about, people kind of buckling down in their own homes and taking care of their own, can you talk about opportunity hoarding and what that is and what that may look like and how to avoid it?
Yeah. So opportunity hoarding is an idea that some education scholars have been talking about for a while. And actually, Lynn Posey-Maddox is a professor here at UW who's written on this topic quite a bit and given some talks about it as well. So under pre-COVID, opportunity hoarding often can look like white folks often or other folks with privileges out of good intention for their own child make decisions that bring more resources and more benefit to their children and can disproportionately impact negatively other children. So examples of this might be, a parent who is advocating hard for their kid to get in talented and gifted programs, or trying to, ensure that the after-school clubs are ones that their kids are interested in. And so therefore we have after-school club that's drawing in kids like their kids, but drawing resources away from a club that might be more of interest, more of value to other kids. So it's not an ill-intended thing, but again, it's that focus of my individual child and taking actions towards trying to secure their self-interest that has negative consequences for others. In other districts, maybe to some extent Madison, I don't know, but in other districts, this can also look like gentrification in schools and how open enrollment can draw in some kids and push out other kids. During this time, I think the potential risks of opportunity hoarding are, taking your dollars out of the public school system by withdrawing your kid, as well as with these community hubs, maybe taking some spots that other families need more, knowing that there are very limited spots in these community hubs. So those are some examples, but I think it's a tricky thing, and that lens of, is this about my individual child, or is this about all children? That's the important lens to keep on, is what's my motivation here, as well as what are the consequences.
Thank you. So this is a little bit of a shift, but focusing on another piece of the 10 actions. So in the spring, we kind of got done with any kind of testing. There wasn't any formal state testing, high stakes, anything like that. Can you explain a little bit about why that's important, particularly during this time? But also I feel like there's that potential thought out there that to not go back to that also.
I can share some thoughts here, and then I'll invite Jami to share a little bit more too. I think just one from like a practical common sense kind of approach, this is an important step in the sense that how do you do high stakes testing when all kids or most kids are virtual? How do you ensure that they've all had, the same preparation? I think just from a practical standpoint, this is crazy. But then also I think it, just like the pandemic kind of sheds light on things that were already messed up, that were already problematic. This is doing that too, in the sense that this is focusing on one kind of educational outcome that maybe isn't the most important one. I've heard a lot of people talk about, just living through this pandemic and engaging our children in thoughtful conversation about what's happening in the world and how that impacts some people more than others, and what do we do about that. That might be the most important education that we have at this time. And from that perspective, testing them on their math skills right now, less important. Yeah. Jami, do you have other thoughts you wanted to share?
I think it just comes back to what Jackie was talking about, giving people a little grace right now. and just letting education look different. Maybe some kids you can accurately assess where they're at through tests, but others, that is not going to be their best representation of if they're learning. And we need to be really flexible with how we gauge whether children are learning. And a standard test doesn't do that. It doesn't allow for cultural differences, doesn't allow for differences in, just kind of all the insecurities right now. So it's very dangerous at this moment, because the gaps between advanced math and whatever these tests lead to could just really mess up the gaps here.
So I'm wondering, along with that, what you're thinking when it comes down to things like grades, because obviously there's a need for there to be strong communication between home and school and teachers and parents. And so maybe not even just around grades, but what have you all been thinking about in terms of how that communication can look like now that we might have this opportunity to think outside the box? To be communicating around who we all are and how kids are progressing in school.
Well, I'll share some thoughts, but these are really coming from kind of my own parent hat here. I think for me, relationships and having valuable connections with people are probably the most important thing, especially since it's happening virtually. I feel like the quality of the relationship is much more important. So the quality of communication with my child's teacher, that feels important to me. So that, I would love to have a conversation with my teacher, my kid's teacher, about here's the world today. Here's what I think my kid needs right now to continue to thrive and be prepared for this kind of world. What do you think about that? What are some goals we should set for my kid? And then how often can we check in on progress on those goals? That feels really like the kind of interaction and relationship that I've always wanted with my kid's teacher, but even more so now, because grades are going to feel irrelevant and impersonal. And that is not what I want. It's not what I think my kid needs. It's not what I think a lot of families need.
Yeah, I feel like from my own perspective in the classroom is that I think we get wrapped up in so much of the busy day-to-day pieces that, that opportunity to have more conversations, even if it's just been via email with families, that there was more regular communication going on because we need to know where families are at in an emotional, psychological sense, like what's going on for them. I guess I personally am hopeful that we'll move in that direction of hopefully moving that into when we're back at school too, that we continue to have those kind of relationships, and that it absolutely has to be, ideally schools, but then also parents reaching out and checking in with what those expectations are, and maybe too, in avoiding the opportunity gap piece, to, as a parent, to be checking in with the school and then not advocating from a my kid sense, but like, are you able to do this with all kids? Or do you mind if I share this with the other parents in the class or something like that? So that like it's like we keep the communication in strong circulation.
Yeah, and with the equity guide, in our last meeting, we were talking about, which of these action items do we want to see move forward most, and there's several that are really about relationships and engaging with families to understand what their needs are, what their interests are, what their assets are as well, and centering our education in that type of exchange, and centering that on the children and families who have been most marginalized and most negatively impacted by the system as is, and exacerbated with the pandemic. I think, that's where we need to go, is a relationship-centered, more, informed, interactive way of approaching education right now, which can allow for more cultural relevance, for more flexibility, for more drawing on the assets that families bring, and meeting the very real needs that we have right now too.
Agreed. Thank you. Eli, looks like I'm bumping back to you to start thinking about where we go from here.
Sure. We're going to wrap up with some specific action points besides sharing the guide that you all helped create, I think, which is great and super helpful. A question I have and this is kind of a big question, but in general, maybe do the three of you feel hopeful about, there's kind of been talk of this may be an opportunity sort of for like a reset on how we sort of do education in general and public education. And I think this guide is, pointing to some of those changes that could be made. And I guess both, do you feel hopeful that this could lead to that? And it's sort of, like you said, it's exposing some of these gaps. It's giving maybe opportunity for us to come together even more as a community and get to know each other more on a one-to-one basis, have families more involved in like what the kids are learning, and there's engagement that way too. So all of those things I think could be benefits ultimately that we see come out of this. But I think we've also pointed to there could be a lot, it could draw the disparities and deficits even farther apart as well. So kind of a different part question, but like, what do you think it will take to spin this in a positive way to say, hey, let's continue this path of, integrating these positive things instead of creating a bigger deficit? Like what, maybe just a couple general things of like, what do you think could lead to that continuing on? Does that make sense?
I'll go ahead and take a stab at it. I think the biggest thing is for us to all wrap our brain around that we're not going to go back to normal, and to celebrate that as kind of what you're saying, as this opportunity to fix some of these issues that have always been there. And so I think that's kind of our biggest mindset shift right now, to when we go back, classrooms, grading may never look the same, and that we need to be okay with that. And standardized testing, people are going to be worried about the logistics of, well, what do we do then? And leaving enough room for imagination of it'll be okay. We'll find a way forward for colleges to decide who they accept, and maybe in a more holistic and authentic way. So, yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, I think, kind of the opportunities that I see, or what gives me hopefulness, is I do think when everything needs to shift, as it does, we may be much more willing, like Jami was saying, to question everything. And I would love to see the schools really ask families, especially those who have been least served by the education system as is, about what does a good education look like? What is the future you want for your children, and how do we help prepare them for that? And really engaging in those conversations, and then thinking about, what was useful from the past, what was useful about our education system that we want to bring forward, as well as what are the assets that our diverse community of families bring into this, and piece together a new system that way. very big picture, but it's time to think very big picture, I think. And for those of us who benefit from multiple privileges, and I'm in that, I think that what gives me hope too is this practice right now that we really need to make and really be committed to, of individual to collective. And we need to think about collective. What ensures our collective well-being at the school level, at the city level, and really, really focus on that during this time too. And I think that can mitigate this tendency toward opportunity hoarding, help ensure that our public school system will be here on the other side of this, and reorient how we all engage together in the schooling space.
That's exactly what I was thinking too, with thinking about being outside of you and yours and what you need, but thinking about, what are the needs of others out there? How can I help take care of the other people around me and my community? And what really are we missing out on? We as anybody, what are we missing out on because we don't have those connections outside of our home, outside of our street, wherever we live? And just how much richer that experience can be if we're reaching out and building those relationships, and having our kids see that, and how much we're learning from all of those opportunities as well.
Yeah, great points. And we're going to move into, I'm going to bring my wife, Jess Steenledge, on to talk about some action steps. And I want to make two very quick points as we wrap up here. One is that I think as we do more of these conversations and discussions, I think it's good to be clear that we should come from the perspective as we talk to each other that as white people in this community, the education system is built on white privilege. So we just have to sort of assume that and take responsibility and think through what that means. And the other thing that Jess graciously pointed out to me as we were reading through the 10 action step guide is that it's not completely, but almost all women. So that was part of this. And I think it points to another issue that I'm learning and trying to own, is that it's been the mothers and women in the families who are taking the brunt of this education at home and what this means. And so, fathers and men need to step up and be a part of this conversation too. So I'm listening a lot. So I'm going to bring Jess on to talk about some specific things for Lowell, but I think these things, as we've heard tonight, you've heard a lot of great ideas about what we can be doing right now to come together and think collectively, and that can be applied to other schools as well. So I'm going to just show that guide on the screen, and she's going to take over.
Oh, okay. Hey, hi, everybody. Again, thank you guys for joining us, women for joining us, and Pam for moderating here. It was really helpful. I don't think I couldn't have done that myself. So now here we have a few action items like specific to what we've talked about here and to Lowell itself. And the first one is stay enrolled. Don't pull your kids out of the district. Your choice to remain or leave the district this year affects not just this year, but the next 3 years. And that's highlighted in the equity guide. And it has a particular impact on the district's ability to hire high quality staff and to close opportunity gaps. So stay enrolled and work with your child's teacher to find the atmosphere that works for your kid instead of leaving entirely. Another suggestion for our school is to fill out your volunteer approval form ahead of time, because that can take 2 weeks to be approved. And we don't know what kind of volunteerism we're going to need, but I'm sure we will need some. If you've never volunteered before, fill it out before the school year starts. If you've done it before, do it again. And we'll provide links for that over email too. We've created a Facebook page similar to Dane County Neighbors Helping Neighbors, which I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with, Lions Helping Lions. And that's a way that people will be able to connect virtually, ask for help, offer help, all kinds of things. Contribute to the Lowell Family Emergency Fund, which you can do. I don't have specific information about how to do that, but I'm sure we can create some sort of link where people can just donate in that way. That's something that Mindy Trudell is involved with, and also the LCO sort of holds that fund for the school. Goodman Center has a yearly backpack drive, and this year they want you to just give them money because that's safer and quicker for everybody. And then I think we talked about this a little bit about the learning hubs, and we'll provide a link where you can help make sure that those learning hubs are fully funded for the school year. Just real quick, MMSD is partnering with MSCR to provide 1,000 childcare spots in these learning hubs, but twice as many kids could be given spots if more funding were allowed to be allocated to other partnerships. So there are links that we can provide to email your school officials and your city officials, and just ask yourself hard questions about how you can use your unique resources to promote equity at Lowell this year. Personally, I don't have any monetary resources. I mean, maybe a little bit, but I can use my time and my energy to promote equity at school, and that's what I'm trying to do here. But some of us have more unique resources too, or just your time is always helpful, always valuable. And so again, we want to plug our next session, which will be August 25th, Tuesday at noon, and that will be with Laleta G, who is the founder of Defending Black Girlhood, and she'll be speaking about what it's like to be a mother and of a child of color in our school district, and also what it's like to be a woman of color in our school district. So tune in next time. And again, thank you everybody for participating. It's been great having you all here.